Not too long ago, I made a video talking about the best non-English Pokemon names from all across the globe, and due to the miracle that is the internet, I found my comment section filled with people from all kinds of nationalities sharing even more awesome Pokemon names. So here we are again with even more Pokemon names that are better or at least super cool in other languages than English. By far the biggest contingent of people proudly sharing their local Pokemon names came from France, to the point there were shoutouts galore to Julian Bardakov, translator of the first few gens in France and apparently a bit of a mini celebrity in the French Pokemon community. He actually has some international prominence as well, as Bardakov was the voice of Luigi for the early Nintendo 64 Mario titles, before the role eventually went to Charles Martinet. It didn't come to him easy though. According to Bardakov himself, he bribed a sound engineer with a rare Magic the Gathering card for a chance to audition for music director Koji Kondo. But anyway, let's focus on some of the Pokemon names Bardakov came up with. That's why you're here after all, starting with Beedrill. Despite it being a fairly weak early game bug type, its French name is one befitting of something much stronger. Or it's mega, I suppose. D'Artagnan combines the word for sting, dar, with the phrase dar dar, meaning hastily or in a hurry, as well as the mythical D'Artagnan, who was a real French soldier who is best known as one of the Three Musketeers, who are already pretty famous worldwide, but are even bigger icons within France, the country the stories hail from. It's a very cool name, one that interprets Beedrill less as a giant bee, as most other countries do, and instead as a sort of jousting knight. It is in fact the only language in the world that doesn't incorporate the word for bee in some fashion. Even Japanese, where Beedrill's name is literally the English word spear, has some bee influence. The Latin genus term for bee is Apis, which in reverse would be Sippa, which is pretty much how the Japanese would pronounce the word spear. Julian Bardakov was still working for Nintendo of France when Gen 2 released, and so he was also behind the brilliant name of any and all Mareep found in the French version. Its name combines the word watt, as in the unit of power that is used worldwide, with the word watt, which means cotton wool and may be written completely differently but is pronounced exactly the same. Meaning that Mareep's name in French is what. Sure, the pun only works in French, but the name is fun to say no matter where you are. It also follows the naming scheme of incorporating a unit of measurement, which all languages do. In English and Japanese, where the name is both Mareep, its name is an anagram for ampere, while the German name is Voltilam, which combines the German name for lamb with volt, obviously. Even though Bardakov left Nintendo before any later generations came out, his replacements kept the high quality up. There were already several awesome French names from later generations in the past video, but another great one that even made for the top comment slipped me by. As Butch Le Colosse points out, the French names for Deerling and Sawsbuck are brilliant, definitely better than the English names I'd say. Deerling is known as Vivaldam over there, which is a combination of dam, which means deer, and Vivaldi, which at first sight feels odd, until you remember that is the name of the famous composer Antonio Vivaldi, who is probably best known for his piece The Four Seasons. As in, the entire identity of the Deerling line. It's a phenomenal name, one of the best out there I'd say, and by just switching dam for deer, so Vivaldir, it could have worked in basically every language. The naming scheme is even kept up for Sawsbuck, who is known as Haydam in French. This again combines dam with the name of a composer, this time Joseph Haydn, who composed the piece known as The Seasons. Gotta be honest, I'm not familiar with Haydn or this musical piece, but that doesn't mean this isn't some brilliant naming from the French localization team. And while I do like this sauce, in Sawsbuck standing for summer, autumn, winter, spring, I would have easily traded Deerling for Vivaldir in the blink of an eye. Going back to the days that Bardakov was in charge of localization for a second, we take a look at Farfetch'd and the story behind its French name, as well as what would later end up becoming the name of Surfetch'd. This was pointed out by Yumi Nikorian, who led me towards an interview done by Bardakov about Farfetch'd's strange name. In French, it's known as canard-tichot, which combines canard, meaning duck, and artichaut, which is an artichoke. As in the vegetable that Farfetch'd is most definitely not holding. According to Bardakov, there was so little time to decide on the French names for the Gen 1 Pokemon that they really had to hurry, and Farfetch'd was one of the few unfortunate ones to be done at the absolute end. And so they just kinda messed up because they were in a hurry. Now, fast forward 23 years and Farfetch'd finally gets an evolution. Surfetch'd, of course. Its name in French ended up being Palarticho, which replaces the word for duck with paladin. Simple enough, right? Well, it's deeper than that. Phonetically, so said out loud, Palarticho sounds like a short sentence, Palarticho, which translates to not an artichoke. Yes, 23 years after the translation team screwed up, their mistake was referenced in a brilliant way when the new team had to figure out a name for Farfetch'd. And while not as deep, I also want to highlight the German name for this Pokemon, which is Lauchsalot, combining Lauch, leek, with Lancelot, one of the Knights of the Round Table. Let's stick with German for a few Pokemon, starting with Annihilate. I don't know if I would say its German name is better per se, because Annihilate is a great name that rolls off the tongue perfectly, but the German version is great in its own right. Epitaph combines the Greek word epitaph, which is also used in English and means the writing on a tombstone or a grave, with the German word Affe, which means ape. I believe the pronunciation doesn't really change, this is purely a written pun, and a clever one at that. Another German name appears to have gained itself some notoriety worldwide, as I saw several comments from seemingly English-speaking people highlighted, which is Kleinstein, Geodude. I get it, it's very fun to say, but if you were thinking that this had in any way, shape or form to do with Albert Einstein, I'm sorry to say you're wrong. Kleinstein just literally means little rock. Probably makes more sense that way too, I don't see a connection between Geodude and Einstein personally. And while we're on the topic of funny names, we cannot skip past the German name for Wobbuffet. While in Japanese the name is meant to sound like a phrase, the English localizers didn't copy that naming scheme, something they possibly regretted because they did end up doing it for why not. German did get the message though, and named Wobbuffet Wohingenau, which said out loud sounds exactly the same as Wohingenau, which means where to exactly. Not only does that make German the only language to follow the train of thought that started in Japan, it also works extremely well for the anime, where obviously Wobbuffet becomes a member of Team Rocket and yells out its name whenever they're blasting off again. Meaning that he basically asks, where are we blasting off to exactly? Every single time. And from what I can tell, this wasn't planned, since the game's Gold and Silver obviously predate the Gold and Silver anime that introduces Jesse's Wobbuffet. This joke also doesn't work in any other language besides German, where it just happened to form as a pure coincidence. Now, for some more funny naming schemes, I wanted to take a look at how the Pokemon that in English go with certain repetition work in other languages. For example, Kling Clang and Kling Clang. Is English unique in doing that, or does every language do it? Well, Japan is the one that set the standard. They go from Gyaru, derived from gear, to Gigyaru, and finally Gigigyaru. It's not quite the same as what English ended up doing, but the vibes are similar. French doesn't really copy it though. Clink is known there as tick, it evolves into click, which then becomes clitty-click, which does incorporate both tick and click, but I don't think it's as clear a connection as Japanese and English have. German basically follows the Japanese example, arguably even closer than English. It goes from click to click-clack to clickety-clack, which is not only fun to say, it's also the sound spinning cocks make, which is also the inspiration for the English name of course. Chinese just ends up completely doing its own thing though. It goes from Shilunyi, meaning gear kid, to Shilunyu, meaning gear group, to finally Xinyunguai, meaning gear monster. Well, as such, Chinese refused to fall in line for this particular Pokemon, they did join the gang for a similar example. Palmy, Palmo, Palmot. Or, as they're known in Japan, Palmo, Palmot, and Parmot. In Chinese, they came up with the trio of Bobut, Botobut, and Bobutobut, which definitely is not as short and snappy as Palmot, but it does mirror the naming convention. French opted for Pome, the Pomot, the Pomarmot, amplifying the marmot aspect of its name, which is put more in the background in Japanese and English, as well as cleverly incorporating ohm, which is another unit of measurement for electricity. Germany takes the cake for me for this one though. It starts the same as Japanese, Pamo, making Palmy one of the few Pokemon to have the same name in Japanese and German, before then moving on to Pamamo and Pamomamo, which is easily one of the most fun names to say. I definitely prefer these German free over the English ones we ended up getting. And finally, before we wrap this video up, we gotta make a little stop in Japan of course. One of their funniest is a relatively new one, Cramorant. It's known in Japanese as oo, as in the letter U twice, pronounced oo. It sounds absolutely bizarre, but this name is actually one of the craziest puns in all of Pokemon. So the sound this name makes, ooh, is the Japanese onomatopoeia for the sound of choking, which obviously fits Cramorant really well. But the sole letter U, so ooh, is also literally the word for a cormorant, the bird Cramorant is based on. It's a wild coincidence if it isn't actually the name itself that led to the creation of the Pokémon, but either way, it's perfect, no notes. But obviously, this wouldn't really work in English, and I wouldn't trade the name Cramorant for ooh. But a Japanese name that would have worked pretty well in English too belongs to another water type, Clawitzer. Now, I really like Clawitzer's English name, it's cool to say, but his Japanese name is great too. Blowster is a combination of blaster and blow that also ends up being an anagram for lobster. They could have lifted his name straight to English and it would have worked perfectly. The French name definitely deserves a shout out too. It's Gumblast, which combines blast with gumbus, which is a species of shrimp, which is actually what Clawitzer is. It's not a lobster or a crab, it's a shrimp. So not only did the French nail their biology, they also created a name that also could have worked perfectly in English. I'm fine with Clawitzer, like I said, it rolls off the tongue nicely, but from a name creation perspective, I think the French and Japanese names are both better. And that's been all for today. Are there any more non-English Pokemon names you really like? Share it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribing. And if you really want to support me, you can now become a channel member to get all kinds of fun perks and help me keep bringing these videos to your doorstep every week. For now, thanks for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.